So it's a great pleasure and privilege to have the chance to tell you about some of the research that I've been involved in on autism. And I'm very aware of the really illustrious and impressive audience that I need to talk to, and also the wonderful mixture of disciplines and interests and backgrounds. But I hope that this topic will resonate with some of you. So, as you know, autism is a neurodevelopmental condition that has a strong genetic component. The symptoms of autism are usually present before the age of 3 years, although sometimes the diagnosis is much later. And we can think about autism both in terms of the genetics and the neurobiology and the behavior, but it's also very important, I think, to think about the mind, or to think about how children and adults with autism process and understand the world. And that's going to be the level of description that I'm mainly going to concentrate on. So autism is diagnosed behaviorally. We don't have a blood test or chromosome test, so the diagnosis is based on a child or adult showing clinically significant impairments in social interaction and communication, and rigid and repetitive traits. And the manifestation of these varies enormously, leading to the notion of an autism spectrum. From, on the one hand, a young child of 3 or 4 who is silent, apparently has no language, doesn't go to his or her parents even when distressed or hurt, and spends hours spinning the wheels of a toy car or watching water drip from their fingers, all the way up to an adult who may be intellectually extremely able, who has a sort of Asperger-type picture, very socially interested, desperate to have a girlfriend, have friends, but systematically getting social interaction wrong, who has no language difficulty at all and likes nothing better than to monologue about their own special interest, as I'm doing now, but doesn't understand if somebody is lying or making a joke or being sarcastic, and whose narrow special interest may have evolved into something that really carves a niche for them in the world. So they may be an astrophysics professor, for example. So a vast manifestation. And in the current diagnostic manual of the APA, we now have social and communication difficulties as one dimension, and rigid and repetitive behavior, including sensory sensitivities, as another dimension. So autism isn't rare. When I first entered autism research, it was considered to be a rare disorder, but we now know that around 1% of children and adults meet the current criteria for autism. And that's around 600,000 people in the UK alone. And it's important to emphasize the adults because there's a real paucity of research on adults, and particularly on older adults with autism. Autism is perhaps more in the media than ever before, and you can barely open a newspaper or listen to the radio or watch the TV without seeing something about autism. And of course, a lot of that reporting is misleading. You'll read about scientists creating autistic mice, or there being some new miracle cure in the States for which you typically have to spend a lot of money. Autism is also very much in the media in fiction. And many of you will have read A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Rain Man was perhaps the first film that brought autism to public attention. Very notable in a lot of these fictional portrayals of autism is that the individual with autism will have a stunning special ability. The child or adult will be the one who can spot the pattern or break the code that handily sews up the plot for the author. So is this just another of those myths? Well, actually, autism is strongly associated with talent, and striking talents are seen at a much higher instant in individuals with autism than in any other group that's been studied. So this presents us with a real puzzle. Here I'm showing you some of the drawings of a famous artist with autism called Nadia, and she did these drawings when she was 3. And at that point, she couldn't do up her own buttons or eat with a knife and fork. She didn't have the coordination to allow her to do that. But if she was given a biro, and it had to be a biro, she could produce really beautiful drawings like these. And often it's not only the final product, but the process that is absolutely amazing in individuals with autism who show special talents. Stephen Wiltshire here is drawing the cityscape of Tokyo from memory after a 20-minute helicopter ride over the city. And although not every individual with autism has talent at the level of Stephen Wiltshire, there are striking talents in perhaps a third of individuals with autism, something that they're really unusually good at compared to that other profile of abilities. And interestingly, these cluster into particular areas. So musical skill, particularly being able to play by ear, math skill, particularly mental calculation, or calendrical calculation, knowing the day of the week that any date in the past or future will fall on, and memory skills, as well as the artistic skills that I've shown you. So why is autism linked to talent? And it's important at this point to say that in thinking about talent in autism, I'm not wishing away or denying the very real difficulties that individuals with autism and their families face. So this little boy may have the special talent that if, when he wakes up, one of those objects has been moved a fraction of an inch, he's going to have a meltdown and be inconsolable. And that may not seem to his family like a special talent, but his ability to notice a minute change in the environment is something that most of us don't possess. But of course, autism is a complex mixture of challenges, but also of some differences in processing that do very often, I believe, lead to talent. So why is autism linked to talent? Well, to try and unpack that, we need to look below the level of behavior to that level of cognition or information processing. How do people with autism see and understand the world? And I think there's no single explanation here that will suffice to explain the complex picture of autism. But I think we've got some good theories, and I'm going to go through 3 good candidate cognitive theories and try and explore whether they can help us to understand why talent is so common in autism. So I'll begin with a theory of helping us to understand why people with autism have such notable social and communication difficulties. And this is the idea, the theory, that most individuals with autism have difficulty attributing mental states to other people. They find it difficult to know what you might be thinking. And this, by contrast, in neurotypical children, is an automatic, in fact, an obligatory ability that children show from at least the second year of life. And it's manifest in such simple things as a child learning to keep secrets or to tell lies. Those already show that a child is able to recognize that what they know isn't necessarily the same as what you know. And indeed, they can manipulate what you might know. And it's often tested with a very simple test called the Sally-Ann task. And this can be acted out with dolls or with people. And you can see this portrayed. You have introduced the characters, Sally and Anne. Sally has a basket, Anne has a box. And Sally has a ball, which she puts in her basket while she goes out. Now, while she's out, naughty Anne moves the ball from the basket to her box. And then when Sally comes back in and she wants to play with her ball, the test question to the child or adult is, where will Sally look for the ball? Or where does Sally think the ball is? And from the age of about 3, and using cleverer technology, even younger in infancy, if you use eye tracking measures, neurotypical children understand that Sally will look in the basket where she thinks the ball is, even though the children know that the ball in reality is in the box. But most children with autism, and indeed some adults with autism, will answer that Sally will look in the box, which is sort of a logical answer, but it doesn't take into account Sally's mistaken belief. Now, this goes a long way to explaining why people with autism find it difficult to understand, are you joking, are you lying, because that's all about your intention as a speaker, and intention is a mental state, and they seem to find it difficult to read mental states. But it also shapes the learning environment for a child with autism. So you can see here the tendency that we have as neurotypical individuals to be guided by other people's interests and attention. So if you walk along the street and everyone's pointing up at something, it's almost impossible not to look. That's how we're programmed. And so here you might see 2 little boys, the one who's looking towards us, maybe a neurotypical child, who's interested in playing with the pots and pans, but even more interested in what his mother or father think about what he's doing. Is he going to get told off? Are they going to join in? And by contrast, the other little boy who's stacking the tins is interested in what he's doing, and that's all he's interested in. That has his sole focus of attention. And his learning, his development, is not going to be shaped by what everybody else thinks. He's not automatically going to be interested in the things that other people are interested in. And maybe that brings some benefits as well as some challenges. So I think there are 3 ways that mind blindness, or lack of theory of mind, may enhance talent in people with autism. Firstly, the ability to maintain your own focus of interest, unaffected by other people's interests, may mean that you can avoid becoming a member of the herd. So you're not wearing these blinkers that we probably take on more and more, especially as we become teenagers, to only be interested in what everyone else is interested in. Secondly, we potentially don't, we as neurotypicals spend a lot of our time and our neural processing in understanding other people. And while we're amazingly impressed by an autistic savant who can memorize a telephone directory, somebody coming from Mars would be amazingly impressed that you can recognize thousands upon thousands of faces. You may not be able to name them all, but you can say if they're familiar or not, and that's a savant ability. It just happens to be one that we all share, so it doesn't surprise us. If we devoted that time and neural processing to other skills, maybe as people with autism do, that might go some part of the way to explaining their extraordinary talents. And the last is more speculative. We've done some work that's shown that people with autism have a different sort of self-awareness, that recognizing their own thoughts may also be different. And this may relate to a greater ability to enter a state of flow, which is often described in sports psychology as that state of being unconscious of your surroundings, completely enveloped in the task in hand, and which is a very productive, also a very pleasant state. And I don't play golf, but I've been told that the way to put off your opponent in golf is to ask them to tell you exactly how they're going to take the next shot. Because some things are better done without too much self-reflection. And this may be something that comes easier to people with autism. So that's the understanding the social part of autism. What about a theory that would help us to